Hello and welcome back to another painting tutorial. In this video we'll be focusing on Madriga from Dungeon Saga. Now I'll be showing you how to paint this elf adventurer using the Army Painter's range of war paints and brushes. So here we have Madriga, and as you can see it's already been primed. Now we've used the matte black spray primer from the Army Painter, and before we did that we made sure we cleaned the miniature by using a toothbrush and some dish soap just to remove any release agents. Now the first task for painting the miniature is to paint the boots, the gloves and also the armour on the torso as well. We'll be painting all of these with oak brown. So for this step I'm using my regiment brush, and I'm just going to have mixed a small amount of water with the paint, and this will give me a much better coverage. I'll do 2 coats as opposed to doing one single coat. This will give me an overall better coverage. So next we'll be highlighting the areas that we've just painted, and for this we'll be using a mixture of ash grey and oak brown mixed in 50-50 quantities. So for this step I'll be using my detail brush here, and I've mixed a small amount of water in with the mix just to improve the flow, and I'll be focusing this on the edges of the leather, such as along the glove here, and I'll just be gently dragging it along there just to create a nice highlight wherever there is an edge. The next step for painting the dark leather areas is to wash over them with dark tone ink. So for this step I'm once again returning to the regiment brush, as I don't really need to have too much detail for this step, and I've also mixed in a small amount of water into the ink. Now this is because I don't want the leather areas to be too dark. I'm just going to be washing this over all of the areas that we've just painted in the previous steps. So the next step is to focus on the other remaining leather armour areas, such as those around the leg and also the midsection of the torso, and also the quiver on the back as well. And we're painting all of these with leather brown. So as this is a base layer, I'm using my regiment brush again. I'm just going to be applying a few thinned coats over the areas just to get a good, nice and even coverage over these areas. As you can see there, just nice and thin, and then once this is dry I'll go over again with a second coat. So next we'll be performing a second layer over the lighter leather areas, and for this we'll be using Monster Brown. Now for this step I'm using my detail brush once again, as this will allow me to pick out all of the individual quilting on the leather armour there as well. And I'm just going to be focusing on the raised areas such as the banding around. I'll be painting this over like so. And also painting the individual quilts on the front there as well. The final step for painting the lighter leather is to wash over everything with soft tone ink. So I'll be applying this wash using my regiment brush, and I'm just going to apply it all over the areas that we've painted in the previous steps, and this will create some nice shading in the areas, as well as tying the first base layer and also the second layer together. The next step is to paint the cloak, and for this we'll be base coating it with Angel Green. So as with the previous base coats that we've done for the leather, I've watered it down slightly so that we can get some nice even coverage, and I'm going to be doing 2 coats of this, and for this layer I'm using my regiment brush. So with the base coat complete, the next stage is to start with the highlights, and the first highlight we'll be doing will be a mixture of necrotic flesh and angel green, mixed in a quantity of 1 part necrotic flesh to 3 parts angel green. So for this first highlight we're using the regiment brush again, and I've watered down the mix slightly, and we've just made a slightly lighter mix of angel green, and we're just going to be applying this onto the raised areas like so, and this will create some nice highlighting. We want to keep the angel green visible in the darker recesses, but on the tips we want to apply the new mix. So now we'll be performing a second highlight, once again using necrotic flesh and also angel green, except we'll be mixing them in 50-50 quantities this time. So for this highlight I'm using again the detail brush, and I'll be focusing my attention on the higher sections here. This is because this mix will be lighter and it represents the light hitting the cloak at the top, so it's just lightly focus on the edges up here with this lighter mix of the green. The final step for painting the cloak is to wash over the entire area with green tone ink. So for this wash I'm using my regiment brush again. I'm going to be applying this over the entirety of the cloak, and this will help to blend in the layers that we've done in the previous steps. So now that we've completed the cloak, the next step is to focus on the bow, the trousers, and also the sheath for the blade just at the back there as well, and also a few of the strings that are just coming out of the quiver at the back there as well. And for this we'll be using ash grey. So when painting these next few areas, be very careful not to overspill onto the areas that we've already painted. I'll also be using my regiment brush for this stage, and I've also watered it down slightly just so that it goes on a lot more smoothly, and I'll be applying several coats as opposed to one thick one. So we'll now be highlighting the trousers and the bow and any of the areas that we've just painted with a mixture of ash grey and also matte white. And we're mixing these into a 1-to-1 mix. So for this step we'll be using the detail brush once again, and we'll be focusing on the raised sections on the trousers and also the bow, making sure that we leave the ash grey visible in the recesses. The next step is to start painting the flesh areas. Now this includes both the face and also the skin on the arms as well. And we're painting these areas with barbarian flesh. So for this step I'm using the detail brush just so I can avoid getting any of the paint onto the areas that we've already painted. And I'll just be painting a few thin layers over the flesh and just building it up to create a nice even cover. Continuing with the skin, we'll now be washing over the areas with flesh wash. So with this wash we want to make sure that it goes over all the skin areas and pulls in all the recesses to create some nice shading. So next we'll be highlighting the skin, and we'll be using a mixture of barbarian flesh and matte white mixed in 50-50 quantities. So using our detail brush we'll now be highlighting the features of the face and also the arms as well, and this will lighten up the tone of the skin and be much more kind of a pale elf colour. So the next step we can begin work on the hair, and first of all we'll be using desert yellow. So for this step I'll be using my detail brush once again, and I'll be painting the desert yellow over all of the hair, making sure not to paint over the skin that we've just covered. So the next step we'll be highlighting the hair with a 50-50 mix of skeleton bone and desert yellow. So we'll be focusing this highlight onto the raised areas of the hair, and I'm using the detail brush, and you can see here just along the fringe I'll just be lightly dragging the brush across there just to create a nice highlight, and I'll be doing this anywhere where there are some raised areas on the hair, leaving the desert yellow visible in the recesses. So the final step is to apply a wash over the hair of soft tone ink. For this step I'm using my detail brush to apply the wash. I'm just going to target this along the hair, making sure that it goes into all of the recesses, and any that just sits on the surface I'm just going to wipe off gently with my finger like so. So the final step for painting the miniature is to paint all of the gold areas. Now this includes the ends of the bow here, and also the hilt on the daggers at the side there as well, and finally the bottom of the quiver at the bottom there as well. And we're painting all of these areas with greedy gold. So we're painting the areas of the gold areas with the detail brush here, just making sure that I avoid overspilling onto any of the areas that we've already completed, as it can be quite difficult to cover over the metallic paint. Once the gold has dried, the next step is to wash it with strong toning. Now washing over the gold areas will help to improve the definition, especially on the detailing here on the ends of the bow, and also help to create a nice and rich gold colour. The final step for painting the gold is to highlight the edges with shining silver, and we'll also be using this on the belt buckle and the band that goes around the waist as well. So as with the previous steps, we'll just be focusing this highlight onto the edges of the gold areas, and this will create a nice gleaming gold effect. And here we have the completed miniature. As you can see, I've also painted the miniature's base, and you can find out how I did that by taking a look at my Dungeon Saga base tutorial. If you found this tutorial useful, let me know in the comments below, and I'll consider doing some of the other Dungeon Saga adventures as well. Additionally, if you would like to support me in making more tutorials, you can do so by pledging your support on my Patreon page, which I'll pop a link to in the description below. So until next time, thanks for watching, and goodbye.